China is holding its 20th Party Congress, which will determine its leadership for the next 5 years. With me today is Michael Schuman, who is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global China Hub. He's based in Beijing and is also the author of Superpower Interrupted: The Chinese History of the World. Us here in Taiwan are concerned about his intentions for Taiwan, especially as we've seen a lot of escalated military activity in recent months. What would you say about his remarks about Taiwan?
What's interesting there, again, was that he actually didn't say really anything new on the Taiwan issue. On the positive side, it means he didn't escalate anything, and he didn't make any new demands. He didn't say anything differently about what his attitude is towards the status quo or anything. But it's clear that the Taiwan issue has risen as an importance under Xi Jinping. It's a topic he talks about all the time, and it's become a very important part of his view of what he calls the Chinese dream, this dream of a return to China's past greatness. And Taiwan's become an indispensable part of that. I wouldn't anticipate going forward that, again, you're going to see a continuation of his stance towards Taiwan in the last couple of years, which is an intensification of pressure, diplomatic and military, on Taiwan, in the hopes of preventing the Taiwan government from drifting closer to the United States, which Xi Jinping, I think, finds very, very threatening.
Well, he did say, that he was warning against interference by outside forces. So it seems like that message was for the United States and also for other countries that are, concerned about defending Taiwan. What do you think about his message to the United States?
I think the view in Beijing now for some time has been that Washington is kind of salami slicing its one China policy and is kind of working to undermine the idea of one China through its continued exchanges with Taiwan. That's going to continue to be of great concern in Beijing. There are some voices in the US who say, well, if Washington took a more cautious policy and made it clearer that Washington really does intend to stick to its one China policy and maintain the status quo, that this would then kind of lead to an easing of tensions. But there's also a dynamic here between Beijing and Taipei, which I think often gets kind of left out of the equation. And I think Xi Jinping finds the current government in Taipei to be especially threatening, and what President Tsai is doing in terms of trying to gain a greater stature for Taiwan on the world stage and greater support from around the world. I think Xi Jinping feels threatened by the whole direction that Taiwan society is going, where there seems to be less and less and less interest in unification and a partnership with China. So there's a lot of dynamics going on here that are unfortunately leading in negative directions where you're likely going to see higher tensions.
Do you think that Xi Jinping has a timeline for reunification or for the possible use of, all necessary measures, military force, basically?
It's a great question. It is one that everybody's asking, and it's one, unfortunately, I don't think we have a really good answer. There are people who make the equation between Xi Jinping's rise and continued control of China and the greater likelihood of conflict. However, I think what we've also seen in recent months is there's only really so far as Xi Jinping really wants to go on Taiwan. Again, he didn't escalate anything in his speech, which was a very important speech and platform for him. He very easily could have done so. He chose not to. And even elements, surrounding the visit of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan in August that sparked this very aggressive reaction from China with those extensive military operations. And he crossed some red lines there, but he also didn't cross others. He didn't, for instance, send Chinese jets actually over the island, steps that actually could really have led to an accidental conflict. There's a ceiling, through which he's not willing to go with at this point. And I think that's an indication that that he is not ready for war, actual war, and the risk of war, at this stage. So it's unclear as to, I think, where this is really headed and what the time frame may be. Unfortunately, as long as tensions stay high like they are, the chances of a conflict increase, whatever anyone's intentions actually are.
We also saw on TV some signs of protests, like banners and some minor protests against Xi Jinping. What would you say about public sentiment towards his leadership at this time?
I think there's very obvious frustration in the major cities, well, such as here in Beijing, with aspects of Xi Jinping's policies, especially his continued very strict controls aimed at preventing a major COVID outbreak, but also some policies on the economy. That's become quite obvious and quite visible both on the streets and also online. In other parts of the country, where that haven't been as severely affected by, for example, his zero COVID policies, the attitude towards some of these regulations and policies may not be quite as negative. And also, Xi Jinping generally, his messaging about China's return to greatness and overcoming its challenges on the world stage and becoming a great power again, and unification with Taiwan. These are all very popular ideas with a certain part of the Chinese population. So it's very likely that Xi Jinping also has a fair level of support among the Chinese public as well.
What would you say are his biggest challenges now?
I think the biggest challenge that China is facing right now is actually Xi Jinping himself, and his policies and what he may be planning to do going forward. Because when you really look at the real impact and results of his policies, his economic policies and foreign policies, specifically over the last 10 years, the results have really not been particularly strong. The economy has slowed down dramatically, seen a great increase of debt, and some of the problems are created by the immediate like COVID restrictions, which had a very severe dampening effect on economic activity. But some of the problems are very deep seated, such as the problems of the housing market, real estate industry. In terms of foreign policy, Xi's more aggressive stand towards the U.S. And the West more broadly has put China at odds with most of the world's major powers. There's an argument that can be made that rather than making China's rise inevitable or more certain, that Xi Jinping's term in power has actually made China's rise more uncertain. The biggest issue for China may actually be kind of a self-inflicted one. As so as Xi Jinping gains in power and he continues to take China down a certain course, is that course really the best for China?
But it looks like they're not going to get rid of him anytime soon, though, right?
Well, it doesn't seem, right. So, in all likelihood, he's going to be around for the next 5 years. But what happens in 5 years in the next Party Congress, that we don't know.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Michael. I've been speaking with Michael Schuman.
Thank you.
He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global China Hub. He's also the author of Superpower Interrupted: The Chinese History of the World.